Right, well, good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to this fourth and final session of the Institute of Water's Environment Conference. And as you all know, because you've registered, this is a special session on becoming professionally registered, becoming either a Chartered Environmentalist or a Registered Environmental Technician. And some breaking news this afternoon: there will be a third environmental qualification issued by Society for the Environment, which we'll hear about shortly. So there'll be a suite of options for you. Now, if you've tuned into the other parts of this conference, you'll have heard me extol the virtues and the importance of becoming professionally registered, because it demonstrates to yourself, to your colleagues, to your managers, your organization, to your regulator, if you're in a water company, that you are competent as judged by your peers, that you are committed to professional standards and committed to continuing professional development. And increasingly, with the focus on the environment and what we're doing to our planet, and the way in which environmental issues are being much more integrated into business practice, and into trying to achieve sustainability, carbon neutrality, and so on, being an environmentalist is ever more important. And being a Chartered Environmentalist or one of the other qualifications just demonstrate that you have that awareness of environmental issues and you can be trusted as a professional. And I can still remember when I did my professional interview to become a Chartered Environmentalist, and was really apprehensive, I have to say, even though I've been around a good while in the environmental field. But it was actually a really inspiring event, because it was a conversation about some of what I know, but a lot of my thoughts about the environment and things I've done. And we'll hear later this afternoon from two of the Institute of Water's assessors about what that assessment process is like and what they look for from someone who's going for professional registration. So that, I hope, will start to take the fear out of it. And we'll also hear from someone who's Gemma Williams, who's been through the journey, and her personal story, which personally I think is really inspiring, and I hope you will too. Before we come on to our first speaker, however, Phil Underwood from Society for the Environment, just a few house rules. If you've been on the other webinars, you will know what these are, but I'll go through them quickly anyway. All delegates will have your microphones and cameras off. Please use the chat function if you want to make any comments, or if there's any technical issues that you need to make us aware of. And Megan Williams, the Institute of Water's Marketing and Events Manager, will be monitoring that. And she's been very ably coordinating all of these 4 sessions behind the scenes. Can you put all your questions, and I'm sure there will be lots of questions as we go through the various speakers, put your questions in the Q&A, and I'll be monitoring those. And we'll keep questions until the end, until we've heard from all of the speakers, and then have a Q&A and a panel discussion with everybody who's involved. The conference is being recorded, so we'll have a record of all of this. I think that's really all I want to say, apart from the fact I should have introduced myself. I'm Ian Barker. I have the honour of being Vice President Environment at the Institute of Water. And it's the first time we've done something like this, an environment conference. We've often done it in collaboration with the Society for the Environment, and had them along there with a stand publicising it. But an interactive webinar like this at a national scale is a first. So we'll kick off. I'm delighted to introduce Phil Underwood. Phil, if you turn your camera and your microphone on now, please. Phil is the engagement manager from Society for the Environment. And if you go on the Society for the Environment website, you'll see all sorts of fantastic resources, which Phil and his colleagues have put on there. And Phil will talk us through some of the perspective in terms of the Society for the Environment, which is the overall body that oversees these professional environmental qualifications. So Phil, over to you, please.
Well, thank you very much, Ian. I hope everyone can hear me. Right, so you don't need much of an introduction to me, but good afternoon. Thank you very much for the opportunity to talk to everyone today, Ian and the Institute of Water gang. I very much hope you enjoyed the conference so far, and hopefully that enjoyment continues over the next 10 minutes or so. Megan, if we go on to the next slide, I think we could probably skip straight to the next one if that's okay. Thank you. So, as you will have seen in the glossy delegate pack, and as Ian has just introduced, I've been invited to talk to you today about the environmental registration options and touch on the processes involved, which I know Sarah Dunn will be explaining a bit more later on as well. So to begin with, who are the Society for the Environment and how do we link to the Institute of Water? Well, through Royal Charter, we hold the 3 registers for environmental professionals and guard the standards for each of those. The 3 registers are the Chartered Environmentalist, or CEnv, the Registered Environmental Practitioner, or REnvP, and the Registered Environmental Technician, or REnvTech. Very simply, that's our core role. I'm going to expand on the registers in a few minutes, and I'm also going to explain the support work that we do alongside that core work. Go on to the next slide, please. So before we go any further, this is our purpose. It's a bit of a mouthful, but in a nutshell, it's what we do. The term environmental professionalism is very key here and kind of forms the basis of our work. And if we go straight on to the next slide. So those professional registrations, as mentioned, we hold each of these registers. Across these registers, there are over 7,500 registered environmental professionals. For clarity, the registers are for individuals. They're not for organizations or teams of people. They are for individuals. Now, clearly that has benefits to organizations and so on, but we'll get to that. The logos are set out on your screen in that formation on purpose, simply because they can be used as a stepping stone towards your chartership goal. Very briefly, transitioning between REnvTech to REnvP to CEnv requires an increasing amount of environmental knowledge, level of practical experience, strategic thinking, and responsibility for each step. And Gemma Williams will be discussing this progression from a first-hand experience after I finish this talk, so don't miss that. Keep listening. It's worth noting at this stage that chartership is not a goal for, it's not everyone's goal, and that's absolutely fine and correct. Each professional registration can be the perfect fit for your area of work and your goals. As a dedicated systems technician, REnvTech is exactly what you need. So it's a stepping stone for some, but it's a perfect fit for others as well. Can we go on to the next slide, please? Now let's link these registers to the Institute of Water, and this also doubles up as the first step towards becoming chartered. Becoming registered, in this case, chartered. You may have seen in one of my first slides, we operate as an umbrella professional body with 24 member bodies. These are all on your screen now. We license each of these professional bodies to award our registrations to their members. All of these hold the license to award CEnv to their members, including the Institute of Water, which you'll see in the bottom right there. There we go. To become a CEnv, the first step is to become a member of one of these professional bodies at their required level. Now that level does vary depending on their membership structures, but the information is pretty easy to find. And I believe for the Institute of Water, it's any membership level within the Institute of Water, you can become a Chartered Environmentalist, as long as you have the relevant areas of expertise. If we move on to the next slide, please. Now CEnv is nice and easy at the moment. We go back one, please, Megan. There we go, big question mark. Now, yes, so all of the member bodies at the moment, they hold a license to award the CEnv registration, and that's very simple. However, REnvP is brand new, as Ian briefly mentioned, and it was only launched this month. So member bodies are now in the process of formalizing their licenses, including the Institute of Water. Now, in all likelihood, and unless I don't know any news from today, and without preempting too much, the Institute of Water will have their REnvP license probably by next week. When they roll that out to their members, i.e. for the people watching today, it's entirely up to them. So watch this space, and I'm sure there'll be plenty of announcements from the Institute of Water at some point. So if we go on to the next slide now, please. As you can see from this slide, we have 3 member bodies licensed to award the REnvTech to their members. And that again includes the Institute of Water. In fact, the Institute of Water were a bit of a trailblazer for REnvTech for a few years before the IES came onto the scene with their license. With all 3 registrations, you need to be a member of one of those professional bodies mentioned on those slides. And we'll keep you up to date about the REnvP. You then apply for registration through the professional body, not with the Society for the Environment. So you do the application with that professional body. Go on to the next slide, please. Right, so before we provide more detail on the process, let's have a look at why you'd want to apply for and continue to hold a environmental professional registration. Let's face it, if there's no benefit, why would you do it? So let's have a look at that. I'm going to pick out maybe 1 or 2 examples. A huge benefit is having those letters after your name and the message that that gives internally and externally within organizations and so on. With those letters, you demonstrate to employers, to clients, to stakeholders, and to yourself that you have proven your environmental capabilities in your discipline, and you have committed to maintaining that high standard. This has also been verified by other independent environmental professionals, which is pretty key to professional registration. So, I mean, in terms of the proving that you have a continued high standards, a bit of an example, a degree is great, fantastic, good start. But in 10 years' time, how do you show that you are still up to date? The CPD requirement of professional registration proves that you are maintaining your skills and knowledge. So it's a very key part. If we go on to the next slide, pick out another benefit. So your professional registration is highly likely to be recognized by your employer as progression and commitment, potentially resulting in more influence, securing maybe that elusive promotion, being able to lead bigger projects and that kind of thing. That added influence could go as far as helping to enhance public trust, respect and buy-in, maybe to make a wider difference. So professional registration should certainly help that. From a watery context, shall we say, we know that UK water companies are employing and developing registered environmental professionals, and they are aware of the benefit that comes from currently REnvTech and CEnv registration. For example, Anglian Water and the Environment Agency are both Chartered Environmentalist Employer Champions, and Anglian Water are also an REnvTech Employer Champion. And that means that's something that we do, that's a program that we run, and it basically means that they, as organizations, they support and they provide the time and the support to their environmental teams or their environmental individuals to progress, to have influence across the organization and that kind of thing. So if we move on to the next slide, talking about employers. Now for employers, just to throw a few words out there, brand, trust, expertise, motivation, competence, showing off a proactive approach to environmental protection is now a key feature for brands. Employing proven experts can only enhance this, really. clients need to know the capabilities of your team. So whether that's engineers, accountants, and environmental professionals. And CEnv is in particular being mandated more and more in tenders by clients. And hopefully RFP and REnvTech will join that. On top of all this, employers can use professional registration within their staff progression frameworks. To progress to senior consultant, for example, you need to be CEnv, for example. I know that a lot of the consultancies, they do that kind of thing. So it's beneficial in many ways, and employers can use that as a stepping stone guide for their actual frameworks internally. Move on to the next slide. Okay, these are just a few nice stats to show really. But I'll focus on the middle one, shall we, which links directly to the benefits. The IES, the Institution of Environmental Sciences, they did a survey back in 2018, I think it was, and they found that Chartered Environmentalist members earned generally, or on average, 33% more than those that weren't Chartered Environmentalists. So not a bad stat to put out there maybe, and something that might help the decision. If we go on to the next slide. So back to those 3 registrations, and what does that application process look like? If we go straight on to the next slide, please. Okay, so the fairly straightforward stages to the application process. The first one being that, as I already mentioned, you need to be a member of a licensed professional bodies, which you've seen the logos of in the previous slide. Now that's at the relevant level, already mentioned. And at that stage, you'll then go to number 2, which is speak to your professional body about your plans to apply, and they will hopefully provide you with the materials and the assistance required to make that application. Now, some licensed members, for example, they have mentoring schemes, that kind of thing, and I'm pretty sure the Institute of Water does. I'm sure someone will be able to confirm that very soon. And they'll be able to provide you with the application form itself, which leads straight onto the third part, which is to complete your written application. Now that's not only will show that you meet all of the eligibility criteria, but it'll also be the main part, or main written part of your application. So you need to show how you meet the 12 key competencies, which I'll show on the screen in the next slide, but we'll get to that in a moment. So once you've submitted your written application, you'll then be, in terms of the Chartered Environmentalist process, you'll be invited to attend an interview, which is the professional review interview. Or for those who are engineers, I believe it's a peer review interview, termed as in for Engineering Council. Same thing, essentially. And then the final step is to sign the Code of Professional Conduct, which again will be provided by the licensed member, but that's our Code of Professional Conduct. By this stage, you'd have already signed the Code of Professional Conduct from the licensed body themselves. Okay, so as mentioned, this is the Chartered Environmentalist route or process. For REnvP and REnvTech, the only difference is that you are unlikely to need the professional review interview element. This isn't part of the standard process for those registrations, but you may still would be invited to one if the assessors think that it could be of benefit to you. And as Ian said at the start, the interview itself for CMs or whoever was invited, it shouldn't be too much of a daunting thing. It's generally quite a relaxed process, and it's talking about you and what you do and what you've put in your application. So don't be too worried about that. We go on to the next slide, please. So to expand on that written application element, we need to look at competencies. Each registration requires you to demonstrate how you meet 12 competencies. These competencies are building blocks of the professional, of registered professionals, shall we say. All of the blocks need to be met or built in order to reach your registration goal. So you do have to show how you meet all of those competencies. Between the three registers, the competencies follow the same structure, but the standard grows from REnvTech to REnvP to CEnv. The competencies are exactly the same no matter which licensed member body you apply via, but you will need to demonstrate how you meet the competencies with relevant examples from that particular sector that the professional body covers. So the Institute of Water, for example, generally would be water-based, but you can include experience from elsewhere as well. If we go on to the next slide. Okay, so these are the C and D competencies as well. So the competencies across the three registrations are directly linked, which creates a structure for progression between them. A basic example is an REnvTech would attend technical meetings, an REnvP would confidently contribute to the meeting, and the CEnv would lead the meeting with strategic objectives in mind, for example. The differences are also that they're highlighted by level of knowledge, the level of knowledge needed. So REnvTech requires the equivalent knowledge of level 3 qualifications, such as A levels. REnvP requires level 5 knowledge, such as H&Ds or foundation degrees. And CEnv requires a level 7 knowledge, such as a master's degree. It's worth noting the term equivalent, and we'll come back to that in a second. I'm not going to go through all the competencies now. You can find them on the SocEnv website or contact the IWater membership team, who will provide them alongside the application form if that's what you are looking to do. If we go on to the next slide. Okay, so let's say you've become a REnvTech or an REnvP or a CEnv. Firstly, many congratulations. Your certificate will be with you very shortly, but what happens next? Firstly, if you add the letters after your name on your LinkedIn profile and email signatures probably, if you proudly frame your certificate in your office or home office as it might be now, and splash the relevant registration logo all over social media, that's always a good first start. But then to continue as a registrant, annually you'll need to submit your CPD records to the professional body you've registered via and pay the annual renewal fee. Now this fee varies across licensed members, but I'm sure Sarah will outline the fees for IWater a bit later on. You will need to ensure your conduct is in line with the codes of professional conduct signed. And lastly, you might want to consider the next step. So if you're an REnvTech, maybe you want to become an REnvP, something to consider in the next few years or so. If we go on to the next slide, please. Okay, so in preparation for this, I thought I had to think about the questions that we get asked a reasonable amount. So can I be a chartered engineer and a chartered environmentalist? Well, yes. Registrants generally come from two different groups. They are core environmental professionals, such as biodiversity officers or environmental impact consultants, and then those who are environmental specialists within their other core role, such as civil engineers specializing in carbon neutral projects or catchment managers, using maybe environmental science to ensure clean water enters the rivers. I'm trying to be topical there. So with that in mind, it makes sense that a chartered engineer, for example, might have an environmental specialism and would be able to show that via environmental registration alongside their CEnv as well. Now, clearly this isn't confined to engineering, chartered scientists, accountants, foresters, maybe ecologists. Anyone can register as an REnvP, REnvTech, CEnv, if they have the relevant competence to do so. Another professional registration doesn't stop you from doing that. In fact, it probably helps because you've been through the process already. How long does it take? Sometimes a few weeks, sometimes it can be a year. It very much depends on how much time you dedicate to the process and if you've done something similar before. It will also depend on the submission deadlines and possibly interview dates that might be set by the licensed bodies. So some of them have specific dates that they hold interviews and so on. So that's something to consider there, but it may not take very long at all. You may also you might find gaps which you then possibly take a couple of months to fill that knowledge gap, depending on the opportunities where you work and so on. Do I need to meet all of the competencies for REnvTech? Yes, and that's the same for REnvP and CEnv. I don't have a master's degree. Does this mean I can't be a CEnv? Now that comes back to what I mentioned earlier about the equivalent knowledge. You do not have to have a master's degree to be a chartered environmentalist. You have to have the equivalent knowledge, which can be built through your experience at your workplace, through other qualifications, and in various other ways. Now licensed members have different ways of measuring that, and it's worth talking to them about how you can show that. I know that our vice chair for the Society of Environment doesn't mind me saying that he's a chartered environmentalist. His highest qualification is GCSE, which is absolutely fine. Okay, can I have the next slide, please? Right, so that's the process involved. In terms of who can become an environmental registrant in the water sector, you're likely to know more than I am, to be honest. Throughout the conference, you've probably heard about all of the environmental challenges and opportunities. So what part do you play in that? And how are you making a difference for the environment? I've listed a few things on the slides, but something to have a think about how you make that impact. If we go on to the next slide, please. So I mentioned at the start that there's more to SocEnv than just holding a register and sending certificates. We champion environmental professionalism far and wide. We engage with employers, professional bodies, the government, and other networks to raise your profile. We work to increase the positioning of environmental professionals and move it from a nice to have to industry standard requirement. That's where we're hoping to go to. And we provide opportunities to share success stories and good practice across sectors to further educate professionals, I guess, and to encourage joined up approaches to tackling the challenges we face at the moment. Go on to the next slide, please. As part of that amplifying of a voice, we annually present the Environmental Professional of the Year Award, and it's fair to say that the water sector is leading the way somewhat with this, with 4 Institute of Water Chartered Environmentalist members winning the award. And I think, I might be corrected on this, I think there's only been 7 winners in total. So that's quite an achievement for the Institute of Water. So you might recognise a few faces on the slide at the moment. If you go on to the next slide. Now these last slides are just for you to find some more information, basically. So as Ian mentioned, there's a lot of content on the SocEnv website, including webinars, lots of how-to videos. So if you want to know more of the in-depth process to become a chartered environmentalist, there's a recorded webinar on that. If you head to the Society's website just there, you'll be able to find details of those. And an upcoming webinar, which I might just give a bit of a plug to, we have the 2017 Environmental Professional of the Year, Philippa Pearson, joining us alongside 2 other chartered environmentalists. That's on the 8th of December, and that's to discuss her chartered environmentalist journey and how it's helped her career so far. And the next slide, please. That's a free webinar, by the way. Feel free to join up. So I am CEnv. This is CEnv specific, but it may well provide good inspiration for anyone else who, environmental professionals on a much broader context than just chartered environmentalists. In August this year, we asked CEnvs to tell us their story, to tell us why they are chartered environmentalists and how they did it and what it means to them. There's lots of short videos, lots of inspiring clips, lots of quotes and so on. If you search for the hashtag #IamCEnv on YouTube and LinkedIn in particular, also on YouTube, also on Twitter as well, but YouTube and LinkedIn in particular. There's some really good examples, and it's quite good fun as well. So have a check that out. You'll see a video on there from me as well, but feel free to ignore that. And the next slide is my last slide, I think. Okay, so this is the last word from me. In terms of the title of this conference, putting the urgency into the climate emergency, I think that trusted, proven environmental competence is pretty key to this, and key to making it happen, and key to making it happen properly. Environmental decisions, as mentioned on the left there, should be made by those who have the competence to do so. And I don't think that needs too much justification. We're increasingly seeing organisations mandate that environmental registrants conduct certain reports, certain tasks and certain jobs because of proven competence internally, and what that shows externally as well. And we think that's the right thing to be doing. Environmental professionals work in every profession. I think they do, and they should do, because every profession has an impact. And we won't address environmental challenges working in silos. So continue your work across sectors and collaborate with those, with other disciplines and so on, and use the help of institutions like IWater to make that happen. And that's the final word from me, really. Did I go over?
Thank you, Phil. That was a great introduction and overview. And if you're sitting there thinking, oh, that seems really complex and I'm not sure that's for me, and it all seems a bit abstract, the next presenter, Gemma Williams, will make it seem real, because Gemma's going to talk about her journey. And as you see from the screen, she's an Ecology and Biodiversity Advisor to Welsh Water. And Gemma's been on a professional journey in various roles with Welsh Water, and she's also very heavily involved in the Welsh area as membership and professional development lead and as an assessor. But this afternoon, it's about her professional journey that I think will bring to life and be quite inspiring in terms of how she has approached her professional development and what it's meant for her. So, Gemma, over to you.
Lovely, thank you, Ian. I'm hoping I'm not on mute and everyone can hear me. So yeah, thank you everybody, thank you for inviting me today as well. So as Ian said, I'm Gemma. I'm the Ecology and Biodiversity Advisor for Welsh Water. I started that role actually just after becoming a Chartered Environmentalist, which happened this summer. So let's go back to the beginning then. So I've always had a passion for the environment, for my love of geography, physical geography, and I'm very, very lucky that I've had the opportunity to make a career from that. So my professional development journey started back in when I came back into the water industry about 4 years ago now, and a colleague and a good friend of mine introduced me to the Institute of Water, and she'd just become a registered environmental technician. And she said to me, oh, Gem, you should have a little look at becoming a registered environmental technician. And, like everybody, well, why should I have a look at this? Why should I become a member of the Institute of Water? So she explained to me, and really she opened the door for me, and I haven't looked back. So I know it's a bit of a cliche about your journey, but for me, it really has been about the journey. So in 2018, I became a registered environmental technician. So to get there, I started off as a catchment risk coordinator with Welsh Water, and this it was such a varied role that it allowed me to build on the skills and knowledge that I already had, but also embrace those knowledge gaps. So how did I start then? So I became a member of the Institute of Water, and I downloaded, if you go onto the Institute of Water, they're really, really helpful. and you can have a look at the link, and you can print, well, it's not very environmentally friendly, I do apologise. You can print off the skills and competencies that Phil just showed us. So I had a little look at that for the Registered Environmental Technician, and I saw, just start making notes, and I decided, yeah, I'm going to go for this. So I had a little look, identified where my skill gaps were, and then I tailored my CPD record to help me gain the experience and the knowledge that I needed to fulfill those competencies. So 2018, fantastic, I became a Registered Environmental Technician, and for me it was great because I could showcase the skills, competencies to external stakeholders, internal stakeholders, and that was a real milestone for me. From there, then I decided, actually, I'd really like to become a Chartered Environmentalist, but how do I get there? So I went back online, had a little look again at the skills and competencies, and it was clear I wasn't ready to become chartered, and that's absolutely fine. It is about the journey, and looking back now, sat where I am now, that journey is really, really important. So again, I had a little look at where my skill gaps were, what kind of experience did I need to gain to fulfill those competencies, and I used my CPD and my development plan. That was really key actually at driving my own professional development. So I used that, and I actually progressed in a role, looking for opportunities and how I can develop myself. So from a catchment risk coordinator, which provided me with such a solid foundation starting in the water industry, it really was. I moved on then to a lean deployment specialist, and you might be thinking, wow, that was a complete change. And it was, for me even, it was a complete change of career for me, but it provided me with that experience of being a line manager, looking at finance, strategic planning, and it was a great development curve for me, and a lot of learning gained from that. And again, that helped me fulfill some of my competencies. So it didn't help me fulfill all of them. So I had to have a little look then. So how can I go and fulfill those other competencies? So as Ian said, I'm a very active member of the Institute of Water, and I would encourage you, if you'd like to become part of the committee, talk to your local committee. There's always lots of opportunities there. So I gained a lot of experience from originally being the secretary, and then moving on then to lead the professional development and membership subcommittee. Not only that, then I think a really good tip as well is you don't have to gain these skills and experience and to develop yourself. It doesn't necessarily have to be work related. So have a look outside of work, what opportunities are there, and really embrace those opportunities. Quite a lot of people think that the opportunities will come to them. No, go out and get them. Have the confidence. What's the worst that can happen? You say no. Well, don't worry about it. Go and have a look what else is there. So I applied for a couple of other schemes. So, for example, there's a charity here in Wales called Qualiteg, and I enrolled on their Step to Non-Exec programme, which let me shadow a board. Again, that was absolutely fantastic experience. And again, it all helped then fulfil those competencies. So, I didn't become Chartered Environmentalist straight away. It did take me a couple of years, but that's absolutely fine because that journey was really important for myself. My confidence has increased, my self-belief, that really has increased a lot. My confidence to believe in myself. I'll be honest, I never thought I'd be speaking at a conference, if I'm totally honest, so this is a first for me. But yeah, have a look for those transferable skills. You might be a coach for your football team, you might be a local leader in your brownies, your scouts, anything like that. They're all transferable skills and they'll help you fulfill those competencies. So from that then, why did I want to become a Chartered Environmentalist then? So I think I really got the appetite after becoming Registered Environmental Technician, because showcased my skills and competencies within the water industry as an environmentalist, showing that I had, you know, I adhere to those standards. It was something that I really wanted to progress with, and showcase that even more, and how I as a person had developed. So yeah, again, becoming chartered, it was great again to show those competencies, to be recognised as well, with external stakeholders. You know, initially, you know, straight away, you know, that kind of chartership as well as registered environmental technician, you know, people know that is a professional development, you know, that's a qualification. So yeah, I definitely would recommend it. I really, really would recommend it. If you're not ready for chartership yet, that's absolutely fine. I'll put my hands up. I wasn't when I first started, but going from that registered environmental technician and following that journey, it really was the best thing I have ever done. And I'm not just saying that, it genuinely, hand on heart, was the best thing I have ever done for my own professional development. So as part of that now, obviously I've become a chartered environmentalist. It doesn't just stop there. So I'm always looking for new opportunities and how I can develop myself and also give something back. So as with all of us sat around this table today, we're all interested and, you know, passionate about the environment. We want to leave a really positive environmental legacy, and, you know, using that kind of network, we can do that together. So I'm hoping, you know, through forums like this and meeting other people, you know, we can do that. And through the chartership as well, it's kind of giving me that even more passion to do that. So yeah, so that's really it in a nutshell, really. From that, actually, I progressed into the role that I'm in now. And I think that is a lot to do with the skills and competencies and the journey that I've had from registered technician to chartership. So definitely recommend having a look into it. Again, especially with the new level that's there as well, the practitioner. You know, there's lots of different avenues. Definitely go onto the website, have a look, print it out, and just make some notes. That's my top tip. Just make some notes, see where you are, and you'll actually be surprised how far you are. And if not, embrace the journey. You won't regret it, I promise you that. So I'm going to pass you back over to Ian. If you do have any questions about my journey and any little top tips or stuff like that, please put them in the chat. So thank you very much, Ian.
Thank you, Gemma, for sharing that with us and sharing your enthusiasm, and amongst lots of really good points, making the one that actually you can get experience outside work, which is relevant to your application for professional qualification. So just reflect on that. And we'll move on now. And I mentioned in my introduction, you know, about my professional interview with two assessors, and I thought, well, how can we take the fear out of having that professional interview? And I thought, I know, we'll get two assessors to have a conversation and talk to each other about the way in which they would approach the professional interview. So I've asked two good friends, Wayne Earp and Rob Bradley, to do this double act. I have no idea how this is going to work, but it's about trusting one's colleagues. Rob is a director at Fluid Solutions based in Scotland, doing whizzy stuff with telemetry and other whizzy kit, and very active in the Scottish area. Wayne had a number of senior roles with Severn Trent Water and is now an independent consultant, and over the years has been very active in our Midlands area, including being an area president, and he remains an assessor. So I'll hand over to Wayne and to Rob, and look forward to hearing what you have to say within your double act.
Ian, thank you very much for that introduction. I'm not sure Rob and I fully understand how this is going to go, but we've had one pass at it, and we'll give it a go. So good afternoon, everybody. I guess, you know, whether you're considering registration or whether perhaps you're thinking of being a mentor or a sponsor, or perhaps even somebody that's thinking of becoming an assessor themselves, what you've all got in common this afternoon is that you're a little bit curious. And if you've ever wondered what happens behind the scenes with assessors, you're sort of, I hope, in the right place. Some of you will probably remember that program, Breaking the Magician's Code. Okay, well, this is going to be a little bit like this, because I tell you what, Rob and I think, are going to give away a few questions that we often use. And I'm not sure, Rob, afterwards whether we'll be able to use them again. But that's what we're going to have a go at doing. I'm going to kick off, and then we're going to start a bit of a discussion between the two of us. And what we're going to do is try and navigate through, very simply, through the process that that Phil and Gemma have just really outlined. So, from an assessor perspective, there's really three stages. There's before the PRI, before the interview, which is all about the application and looking at that. There's then the interview itself, and then finally there's the discussion and the deliberation that goes on afterwards to assess the applicant. So we're going to go through all of those, and we've put together, and this will be available after the session, we've put it together a super pack of top tips for anybody that wants to become registered. And I say we, it's a bit like the royal we, because it's been put together with the help of 9 other assessors across the Institute of Water, from the engineering side as well as the environmental side. So a big thank you to those. So you'll get that in a pack that's available for download afterwards. If any of you are assessors, or if you've got any questions, then please throw up any tips, comments, or anything on the questions and the comments as we go along. So let's delve in, Rob, to that first part of the process, the before stage, before the PRI interview. And I guess every assessor must have their own different way of approaching this stage. Mine personally involves coffee. It involves lots of coffee. And what I like to do when I get a new application is literally sit down and read it unencumbered as a whole. That means reading through the applicant's CV, their CPD, their written report on competencies. And what I'm trying to do is just get a feel overall to be able to make a judgment as to whether that applicant has demonstrated, and if they haven't quite demonstrated everything, have they had enough experience, and do they show the right things in their CPD to say, yeah, they're the right person to take through now to that professional interview. So that's my approach. Lots of coffee. Rob, what about you?
Well, I'm slightly different, I have to say, Wayne. And one of the things I suppose to expand on for our audience's perspective is that both Wayne and I, this is the first giveaway here, have actually conducted quite a few assessments together. So we are quite comfortable with this back and forth. And the approach I tend to take is actually coffee free, but that's partly because I have coffee first thing in the morning, and that should last me the day. One of the things which I like to look for is slightly different for us. It's like the same as Wayne's actually, insofar as people have been writing a report, they've been pulling together their CPD, they basically send a pack off. And a lot of emotion and a lot of concentrated thoughts gone into it. And what we're looking for is how it all joins together. And not so much to look at the individual components, but to see how it fits. And to see also, in this day and age where we're not doing face-to-face anymore, how the character of someone comes through with their writing. It's all about articulating competence. The review, the assessor review, I suppose, also looks at the strengths and weaknesses, and we start to really unpick the way that people write about themselves through the language of competence. Phil mentioned the 12 at the beginning, but basically it can be broken down to 4. Well, you've got knowledge, how you apply that knowledge, so that could be management, how you communicate with people, and again, management to a certain extent, but also it can be talking with public, can be talking with customers, and then finally, how you conduct yourself from a professional perspective. And it's the rounded side of how you bring all those elements together that I really look for. I think one other thing I suppose I'll mention here is that occasionally I come across, both in this world and in others, as being a little bit pedantic, specifically when it comes to spelling and grammar. And I think it's important to just point out that when you're writing about yourself in this way, you're crediting yourself with a level of professional standards. And that's what this approach is all about. You're demonstrating the standard that you work at. We call it chartership, but there's also a certain level within yourself that's brought you to here. Wayne, you want to go on to the interview itself, or do you want to backtrack a little back to what happens before that?
No, I'm happy.
Ahead of that.
Yeah, I'm happy to go on to the interview. I guess just to sort of round off that section, Rob, it really is just emphasising that point. Look at things from a whole, and you know, we really want everybody to succeed in this process. But if somebody really hasn't demonstrated, and that's the key word I think you use, demonstrated, that they've achieved all of the competencies, then really it would be unfair to take that applicant through to the interview stage. What we will do, of course, is give them loads of great feedback and support to sort of help them on the journey. And I've got to say, it's actually quite unusual. We've had, haven't we, over the years, Rob, 1 or 2 applications that have been absolutely amazing. And you can just see from this, you think, this is great. I am going to really enjoy. I enjoy every assessment, but I'm going to really enjoy this. But usually there will be strengths and weaknesses, as you say, Rob. And when we now go into the PRI, the interview itself, what should the applicant expect? Well, I think for me, anything that they've demonstrated as a strength, I really just want to make sure in the interview, when I look them in the eyes, that that's all true. It's their work. They use the word you. I can see that. And then move on quickly to try and, it's not probing for the weaknesses, but it's trying to help draw out from them every bit of experience they've got to demonstrate the competence where they haven't been able to do so in their application. Is that fair? What else have you got to add to that, Rob?
Well, I suppose just a wee bit of background is, so I mentioned earlier about we've had over through necessity this year go to the virtual platform. We've been fortunate in hindsight having conducted at least 2 or 3 virtual interviews. And one of the big differences between that and the face-to-face, do you remember those heady days of 2019 where we could sit down in a room with people? Ian alluded to this earlier. It is a structured conversation. We say, broadly speaking, it'll last between 60 and 90 minutes. But we don't want to put people off in terms of it's an interview, because most people associate that word with applying for a job in a stressful situation. And I think this is the first, though the second tip will fly in here, is that one of the things that we have to do these days is really extend that period of introduction where the 3 of us are sitting in that virtual room together. We're introducing ourselves to each other, and we're basically trying to work out the pace of how this is going to go. So we are typically asked a couple of questions in the first 20 minutes to settle people down and really to get them to talk in a way that we can understand a little bit how they speak, a little bit to show some of the passion they have, and also, much more importantly, just to settle those nerves down a bit. I think it's really important to really kind of emphasize at this point, something that you picked up earlier there, is that for me, as a member of the Institute of Water, doing these interviews is one of the best actual things which I have the opportunity to do. It's a really rare opportunity to be able to sit with someone, talk about their entire career to date, their dreams, their aspirations, how they've got to where they've come from, and more importantly, how we can help them progress onto greater levels. And it's fantastic to get the opportunity to do this.
And Rob, I think I mentioned earlier that we might share a few of the sort of questions we ask. Are you prepared to share any of yours at the moment?
Yeah, well, I suppose what's one of the aspects that we would talk about a lot. When we're looking at reports and applications, we're looking for the word I did X, I did Y. So the top 4 questions, I suppose, are what did you do? So when we're unclear, it's usually in terminology. So someone is coming from a particularly specialist role that neither of us have experience in. And if they use acronyms, that's usually a flag for me to say, I'm not sure what this means. You've met me in a lift. Tell me in 3 minutes what it's about.
Yeah, I think absolutely. That's a key one. I always like getting 2 competencies for the price of 1 question as well. And I think the one you've just mentioned there around, you know, if you're in a lift with your CEO, tell me in 3 minutes how you would insert your project, your vision, your approach, whatever. Tell me in 3 minutes how you would communicate that to your chief executive, because that not only demonstrates the competence from an environmental, the sort of section A, section B competencies, but the really, really important one from a chartered environmentalist point of view is that the applicant has internalized all of that and is able to communicate things in a very clear, concise manner. And I think that's a super one. And I often like following that up with, so if you've done that, how would you actually measure your success with your project? So thinking about how it's not just I've given a presentation, I've done this, I've inspired the team. How do you then go back and measure the effectiveness of your intervention?
Yeah, and I think one of the things which draws out of that is then we start to, that's where the CPD supplies report comes into its own, because it adds a dimension and depth behind the report, which can be quite iterative. We're asking what people did, and when people work in teams, as they do a lot in the water industry, it can be quite difficult to extract individual achievements within that team. What were the impact of it? CPD is a great way of describing that and describing the motivation behind why something has been achieved, and equally importantly, what comes next. But talking about scoring, do you want to move on to what happens at the closing part on the afterwards?
Yeah, happy to do that, Rob. So after the interview, of course, as far as the applicant is concerned, that's it. They can go and at least breathe a sigh of relief after all that sort of hard work and effort. But from an assessor perspective, of course, we've still got a tough job then. And one of the things the applicant will have noticed throughout the interview is that we're scribbling things down. So occasionally, you know, if one of us has got our head down away from the camera like this, don't worry, we've not fallen asleep, we're not bored or disinterested. What we're doing is making notes, because in that final session after the interview, what we need to do is, you know, remember, it's not Rob and my decision as to whether the applicant becomes a chartered environmentalist. That's down to the panel. Our job at that point is to actually articulate how the applicant has demonstrated to us their experience, their experience of competencies in a way that will convince the panel as well. So we're always writing things down. And after the interview, we have a little scoring system that will individually, well, the way Rob and I work, we sort of individually split up. We'll look across every competency. We'll do a very quick scoring on a sort of 1 to 3. And we'll sort of add all of that up. And once we've done that, then we'll get together again, won't we, Rob? And just then focus on, I think, the high scores and the low scores. And basically between us thrash out, because there'll be things that as you're talking, I'll miss, you know, and vice versa.
Yeah, and it's one of the things, again, I keep coming back to this virtual world, having these recorded these days, and all the assessments we've done to date, we ask candidates if they are welcome, if they are happy for us to record, which we'll use for training other assessors as well. But equally, it's fantastic. It's a relief in some respects to be able to go back to that recording and see, right, I was writing, Wayne was writing. It was a fascinating piece of evidence that we've been presented with. I can't remember what they said. Oh my God. And be able to go back and actually see it. It's very, very useful indeed.
Yeah.
So I see Ian's coming on to wind us up here. We are going to provide a 9-sheet slide deck to after this that's got everything we covered just now and more in it. The environment panel, as part of the Institute, will assess our recommendations, and then through HQ and Sarah, who's coming up next, she'll presumably deal with the next part. Wayne, this has been a great opportunity for us to have the type of chat that we normally do anyway during assessment, but actually with a much wider audience. And Ian, thank you very much for the opportunity to do so.
Thanks, Ian. Thanks, everybody.
Well, thank you, Rob and Wayne. That was a unique insight, I think, into the way in which assessors work. And you both used the word demonstrate a lot, you know, how important it is to demonstrate against the competencies. And we've got a question around that, which we'll come on to after the end of the presentations. So just a reminder to all the colleagues on the call, don't forget to put any questions you've got into the Q&A. We've got a unique assemblage here of experts to help answer your questions and address any concerns that you might have. So before we come on to the Q&A, we'll hear from our final panelists this afternoon. And the best way I can describe Sarah Dunn, who is the Professional Registration Manager at the Institute of Water headquarters, the best way I can describe Sarah is as the friendly face of professional registration. And she will see you through the process from your initial your initial application, your initial thoughts around it, right through to professional registration and sending you the congratulatory letter. So over to you, Sarah.
Hi, everyone, and thanks, Ian. That's very kind of you. So yes, I mean, I'm hoping I'm not going to end up repeating a lot of what has been said. You know, people have given some really useful advice to you this afternoon as a potential applicant, and I hope I'm not going to repeat everybody else's words too much, but I will try my best to tell you about the process from a more practical point of view. A little bit about me. As you can see, I'm the Professional Registration Manager at the Institute of Water. I deal with everything to do with professional registration. I liaise with candidates, I liaise with assessors, people like Rob and Wayne, and I also liaise with the 3 registration authorities that have licensed us to award the registrations that we do. We have 8 registrations that we currently offer, soon to be 9 with the new REnvP. And I also am responsible for the CPD monitoring annual exercise that we take part in, the members take part in every year. So I'm responsible for that too, and a little bit of everything else in between as well. We're a small team, so we all get involved in everybody else's things as well. Okay, if I could have the first slide, please, Megan. Okay, so I mentioned a little bit about the 8 registrations that we currently offer, soon to be 9, and you can see all of those on the screen now. So I know Phil has gone through all the 3 registrations: the Chartered Environmentalist, Registered Environmental Practitioner, and the REnvTech registration that SocEnv licenses for. But we are also have the ability to award the 3 Engineering Council registrations that you see on there, and the 3 Science Council registrations. And I should probably just point out at this juncture that we've recently launched a new route to Chartered Environmentalist, and that's open to people who already hold either Chartered Engineer or Chartered Scientist registration. And that could be through the Institute of Water, or it could be with a different professional body. So perhaps if you're interested in, if you already hold CEnv or CSci, and you're interested in becoming a Chartered Environmentalist, there is a sort of streamlined version of the application process that we've recently launched, and you'll see details of that on the website. So Megan, if you could maybe move on, please, and now this just shows really where to get all your information from if you're considering making an application. This is our website. So along the top bars, there is a tab for professional registration, and underneath that you'll see the registration split into the three disciplines that we offer. So science, environment, and engineering. And if you click on the engineering registration tab, it will bring up a page for each of the specific registrations that we offer. And on those specific pages, you'll be able to download application forms, be able to see the competencies that Phil showed a little bit earlier, the standards, and you'll also be able to see some case studies of people who've gone through the process as well. So really everything you need is on there. You can pop onto the next slide, please, Megan. Okay, so we've touched on some of this already, so I won't draw this out, but you do need to be a member of the Institute of Water if you want to make an application for an environmental registration. You need to make sure as well that you've read and understood the specific standards or the competencies for the level that you're applying for. One of the most frequently asked questions that I get is, oh, you know, I work in such and such water company, this is my job title, what would you say I should make an application for? Which level should I be applying for CEnv? Should I be applying for REnvTech? But really, I end up always having to say, that is your decision, because only you know the sort of work that you are involved in, you know what skills, what experience you've got. I don't. So it really is a case of sitting down with the competencies and looking at your experience and matching the two up and seeing which one, which level, which grade of membership is the most appropriate for you. I've said that you can download all the information from our website, and you need to fill in absolutely every section of the competencies on the application form. You know, don't leave any bits out. Other things that you'd need to provide are your CV, your current job description, any academic certificates or any certificates that you've got that you think might be relevant to your application that you would like an assessor to see. We also expect to see a CPD record. So usually for CEnv and for REnvP, it will be the same as well. We'd expect to see at least 2 years worth of CPD. And we'd also like, as part of that, a development action plan or something that illustrates where you want to go in the next year, say. So a CPD record is great for looking back on what you've done, but the development action plan is like where you see yourself going in the next year. So we'd like that as well. For REnvTech, for the other technician level registrations, we expect to see a CPD record of around 12 months. So slight difference there. And we'd also expect you to have 2 sponsors for your application. They may be a mentor, they may be a line manager. We do ask that normally one of them should be professionally registered themselves. Ideally, they'd be registered at the level that you were going for. So if you're applying for CEnv, if you're applying for chartership, we'd quite like a CEnv to be one of your sponsors. But perhaps if you don't know somebody who's a CEnv, perhaps another chartered level, a chartered scientist, a chartered engineer would be a suitable sponsor as well. But really, if you get stuck on anything like that, then it's best to come to me and I'll try and help you through that if you get stuck for people. Okay, if you want to move on, please, Megan. Okay, so we've talked about this, you know, how would your application be assessed for CEnv and also for the REnvP. We've made the decision that we will be doing the professional review for both for that registration too, as well as for Chartered Environmentalist. So I won't dwell on that because Rob and Wayne went through the process for CEnv and REnvP through the professional review part in detail. But for the Registered Environmental Technician assessment, there isn't a professional review. The candidate would complete the application form, it would go to 2 assessors, and they would review and discuss it and make a recommendation on the basis of that. There isn't a professional review element to the technician registration. Okay, if you could move the next slide, please. Okay, so another frequently asked question is how much does it cost? Well, it doesn't cost to make an application, but we do have a cost for, we do have a fee for the professional review interview, and that's £168. And if you are successful, then the Society for the Environment charge an initial registration fee. And you can see the prices of those on the screen there at the moment. But I should point out all these fees are currently half price, and that's until the 31st of March, and that's an offer that the Society for the Environment brought in really specifically for the pandemic. So if you can get an application in, I would try and get it in as soon as you can. There is a renewal fee on the right hand side as well, and that would be paid as part of your annual subscription to Institute of Water, and the sort of renewal for the registration would go to Society for the Environment to ensure that you were still kept on the register. Okay, if we could have the next slide, please. Okay, so as the assessors Wayne and Rob were mentioning earlier, they make a recommendation, and that at the end of the assessment, they make a recommendation, and they make a judgment to either award or refer the registration. We don't have any fails. We like to say that we only have referrals. You know, if our assessors are really good at giving good comprehensive feedback, if a candidate perhaps wasn't quite at the level, didn't quite demonstrate the competencies that were expected. So we have a really good feedback ability, so we can contact you as a candidate and say, look, unfortunately they don't want to take it any further at the moment, but this is what they suggest you work on, and then it would be a case of resubmitting. So top tips, obviously I know that it was already mentioned before, a couple of the things on there, but it's a really good idea to get a mentor perhaps before you make an application. We have a mentoring matching service that's available to all our members, and I would really suggest that you look on there for, if you're interested in registration, you can search by different different disciplines. So you might look for an environmental registration mentor or an engineering registration mentor. So that's, I would definitely suggest looking at that. I'd also suggest getting your CPD up to date before you start to apply. So don't sort of make complete all the application form and then go, oh, I haven't started my CPD record. You know, get into the habit of getting that updated regularly, and that will help when you do feel ready to make an application. Again, Wayne and Rob mentioned this, but another key thing that I get told is, oh, you know, a candidate needs to use the word I in their application as much as they can, because as people work in teams quite a lot, it's really quite often that people go, oh, we did this, we did that. It's really important that we get to know what you did, because it's an award that goes to an individual, not a team. And then my last bit is absolutely get in touch with me if you're a little bit stuck, if you're not really sure, don't know what to do. There's absolutely no such thing as a daft question. So just get in touch with me and I'll try and help and support as best I can. I think quite, you know, a few people have said that one of the nice things about applying for registration through the Institute of Water is that because we're quite a relatively small team, then it's you're going to know the person who you get in touch with, and you'll get a personal sort of response. If you have any questions, then absolutely get in touch, and I'll do my best to help. But yeah, that's I think that's me.
Thank you, Sarah. That I'm sure was a big help to lots of folk, but in particular the reassurance that you are there and there is no such thing as a daft question. And if you didn't catch Sarah's details, just go on the Institute Water website. We'll go on to the Q&A now, and if I can ask the panelists to turn their cameras back on and just begin with a very simple, quick question for you, Sarah, which is the fee on top of Institute of Water membership?
Yes. So you would pay your Institute of Water membership, and then if you were successful, let's say for CEnv, you would pay, I think it's £88 for that initial registration, and then the following year you would pay your membership fee, and you would also pay, well, the renewal fee, so that would, I think, is £44. So yeah, it is on top, yeah, and that goes straight to the Society for the Environment. Yeah.
Thank you. And there's a question which Rob answered briefly. The question is, what sort of evidence do you need to provide? And that, and that's quite fundamental. And I know for a lot of people that think, oh, what do I need to submit? And Rob, you said depends a little on the standard you apply for. Broadly speaking, a report of some type, CPD record and a CV to get the relevant application form. But I wonder if you and Wayne would just like to put a bit more flesh on the bones of that in terms of what sort of evidence do you look for in an application?
I think to start off with, I talked about a report, and over the years that I've been assessing, that structure of that report has changed a little. It was alluded to earlier that with regard to a master's degree, if someone didn't have that, there used to be the requirement for a master's equivalent report, which was separate. Similar to a lot of things about the Institute, it's very much down to the individual, how they structure the report that they put together. We're looking for a expanded CV in terms of what people have done over the course of their career in specific relevance to a competence. And I think, touching on one of the aspects that Sarah brought up there, find a mentor. The mentors which are out there that are skilled with helping people prepare for Institute and for chartership and for registration, professional registration. So I'm picking the words up from the screen. Will help you with an understanding of how best to report or to structure that report. The only other thing I was going to touch on was CV. Please make sure it's relevant and preferably written by yourself as opposed to a company specific one. We're always looking for individual touches which demonstrate personal input to the process. Wayne?
Yeah, the only thing I'd add, Rob, is something that Gemma, you mentioned and we didn't pick up on, and that's transferable skills. So a lot of the applications we've seen where people are doing voluntary work or they've had a past career, they can bring those skills and use those to demonstrate the competencies, particularly when it comes to leadership, conflict management, and that type of thing. So don't forget about that. You don't have to specifically concentrate everything on your water experience.
Yeah, thanks, Rob. Thanks, Wayne. We'll come on to another question, which might seem a bit left field, but I think it's really important. It's from Lorna Devonish, who's asking, would this be open to a communications professional working in the environmental sector? In my experience, communications professionals are probably among the best people to have a broad understanding of the entirety of the sector, and that just because they're not an ologist wouldn't debar them from applying to be a chartered environmentalist. But I'd be interested in the views of other colleagues on the panel, and shoot me down in flames if you think I haven't got this right.
I could jump in there to begin with, Ian, if that's okay. We have been asked in the Scottish area this type of question a lot, both in terms of other people within the water industry who don't fit to a specific engineering or scientist, and they only one left is the environmentalist. And ultimately, if we think about the themes of this conference, everybody that either works in the industry or is a customer has a tangible connection to the environment. So therefore, in my opinion, everybody in that sphere is eligible to apply themselves to become registered as an environmental professional.
Yeah, absolutely. Any more comments? No.
Yeah,
So, yeah, Wayne. Yeah.
Sorry, Ian. Yeah, I was just going to sort of chip in, and we've talked a lot about the I word. Think about the experience there. So for a chartered environmentalist, you're looking for people that you can sort out complex problems. You can communicate and make the complex simple. Look at the value you've added and the difference you've made. And if you can answer yes to all of those things, then by all means, yeah, get an application in and let's have a look at it. Or at the very least, speak to a sponsor, a mentor, any of us.
Yeah.
The only thing I'd like to add, if I may, Ian, is that I'm reasonably pleased with the answers that have been given by my fellow panelists. As a communications professional, it's quite reassuring. So who knows?
Great, Phil. Yeah. And Phil, there is a question for you here from Tim Boldero. For the benefit of new applicants, could you clarify the difference between the 12 key competencies and their associated bullet point, and whether an applicant has any flexibility over those bullets, or do all applicants have to demonstrate competence against each of them?
Okay. So to explain that a little bit more, you may have noticed in my presentation the slide with the Chartered Environmentalist competencies, I think, were on there. They were split into A, B, C, and D, which is something that Rob mentioned in his talk as well. I don't know if Megan's able to go back to that, it might be easier, but so there's 12 competencies. They are split into those A to D sections, and each section has a bit of a theme to it, I guess. The A and B is a collective. That's more to do with your application of knowledge in your work and other areas of experience as well. So what do you know and how do you implement it, essentially? C and D is more your soft skills, I would say. Communication, how you show your responsibilities as an environmental professional, how you manage your own professional development and that kind of thing. Now the bullet points that Tim refers to, they weren't on the slide. So each of those 12 competencies then have a set of bullet points underneath them. When you receive your application pack and so on, you'll see that there are bullet points underneath each of those competencies. And they are more there for guidance, prompts, more than anything. You don't have to demonstrate all of those bullet points. Now the assessors here might correct me on this, but generally speaking, you wouldn't have to show how you meet all of them, but they give you an idea of what you should be talking about, what kind of knowledge and experience you can add in there to ensure that you're meeting those competencies. Hopefully that helps, and that's the same with all three of the registrations.
Thank you, Phil. I think that the key thing is it can seem quite daunting when you look at that long list, and think you've got to be Mary Poppins, you've got to be practically perfect in every way. But actually, I doubt that anybody is perfect at everything. And the assessors will probe and draw you out so that you're giving your best shot at each of those, and they'll take it then in the round. There's a question around CPD, which is very relevant, which is how do you suggest people continue with their CPD during COVID? Wayne and Rob, do you want to have a go at this? And then I'll come on to you, Gemma.
Yeah, I can kick that one off, Ian. I think the first thing I would say is think of CPD in a very broad sense. CPD is not just attending an event. So today doing this is part of the CPD. The assessing that Rob and I do is part of our personal CPD. I include that on my CPD. I know Rob does as well. Reading journals, even, you know, keeping up to date with things. Anything, there's a whole list of things that you can contribute to CPD. And I've got to say, whilst we all miss the interaction of meeting up, I've actually found this year I've got actually more on my list of CPD than I've had in past years because of webinars and because of sessions like this. Yeah,
exactly. Rob?
I've got a couple of things to add to that, slightly drawing out from the question that we had from Lorna there. One of the things that is important to remember about ourselves as professionals is that because we're now having to communicate virtually, how we do that is actually increasingly important. And the point of putting CPD together and the development action plan that Sarah mentioned is goal setting to a certain extent. That might be with an interim goal of becoming registered. It might be from a perspective slightly longer term to advance in a different direction in your industry. And elements that or activities that you choose to do should supplement that goal. Once we come out of COVID and we go back to face-to-face interaction, a lot of the communication skills that we used to do, I think, will come back. We're going to be natural at doing that. But what we have now the opportunity to do is express ourselves significantly better virtually than any other time that I've certainly had the opportunity to. And I'm thinking about things like what Charlotte was mentioning earlier, the blog that she writes, how Phil in particular is stellar example at putting things on LinkedIn and promoting ourselves in that respect. But then the other elements of this is the interaction. It's all very well putting a message out there, but how do you deal with dialogue and discussion? All these things are perfectly suited to the COVID period at the moment. I'm not saying I'm the best example of it, but that's something that I'm trying.
Yeah, and Gemma, how are you finding it in COVID?
Yeah, so just to reflect really on what Rob and Wayne said. So I'm quite lucky in a way because I've gone into a new role. So I've got a lot of learning opportunities there within that new role. But what I've also found, I live in West Wales, literally the next stop is the sea. So I usually, in a non-COVID environment, find it quite hard to get to quite a lot of events. So I'm really embracing all of the webinars and everything now that it has gone online. Don't get me wrong, I'm missing having a cup of tea and a biscuit with people. I really am missing that. But I'm really embracing that things are online and they're much more easier to get access to. But as well, in my CPD as well, I've kind of looked at how we've adapted to COVID and how I've learned from that and that kind of adaptation. So that's kind of what my CPD is looking like at the moment. So again, it's all about your journey and there's lots of different things that you can put down that qualify for CPD. You know, just remember it's your journey, it's what's helping you develop. There's no right or wrong really.
Yeah, thanks. And I think, you know, one of the beneficial side effects is, as you mentioned, Wayne, there's so many webinars now that it's possible to tap into. And I think, you know, it's a great opportunity to be curious about things that might seem peripheral to what you do, but actually when you find out more about them, they can be really beneficial in terms of you doing your core job better. And Gemma, while we're with you, well, a couple of things. First of all, I'll embarrass you, if I may. There was a question, which is actually a comment, which is someone said Gemma is inspiring.
Oh, bless, thank you. Thank you very much.
And then there's a question. Gemma, I was on all the CPD sessions you presented for the Institute of Water recently, which I found extremely helpful. Are there any plans to do the same for chartership and to go through the competencies, etc.?
That's great. Thank you for the feedback. That's absolutely lovely. So in the Welsh area, for those of you that might not have seen the comms around it. We've just finished our CPD and Professional Development Month, where we've had a webinar every week covering development plans, CPD, types of professional registration, and then we had a question and answer session this week. They are all recorded, I think, so you can look back at them. So I hadn't actually planned on doing anything more with chartership and registration and things like that, but if that's something that you'd like, there we are. I will definitely look into it in the new year for you, definitely. So it's lovely to have that feedback. So the answer is no, I hadn't planned on doing it, but if you'll find that useful, I will definitely look into it for the new year for you.
Great. Well, thank you very much for that, and I'm sure colleagues will be happy to support you on that. And we've got a little bit of time left, and there's one question left. If we can cover this one quickly, is a development action plan the same as a PDP, or is there a specific format? Can anyone answer that one? Is a development action plan the same as a PDP? Or
I'll have a go answering it.
Thanks, Sarah.
I mean, hiya. I think I'm assuming that a PDP would be a personal development plan. So I think so long as it's forward-looking, then that's fine. It's about, so also, as well as having a CPD record which says what you've done, it's about having something that looks a little bit more forward about what you might be intending to do. So if that's what's on your PDP, whatever the name is, that, you know, perhaps a different workplaces call it, then that would be fine. There isn't a specific format, so use whatever you feel most comfortable with and what represents the best way of recording what you want to do going forward.
Great. Thank you very much, Sarah. And we've run out of time and run out of questions, so that's worked out beautifully. So it just remains now for me to give some thank yous. First of all, to all of the panelists here who have given a lot in terms of preparation, I know, for this. And I hope all 50 odd of you on the call have found this helpful. But it doesn't end here. People like Sarah and all the rest of the tribe, you know, are all here to help. So, you know, do ask questions, do engage. There's lots of ways that we can help guide you through the process. And it's nowhere near as daunting as it might appear at first sight. And I do want to pay particular thanks to the 50 or so of you who have been on this call. It's great to see so many of you interested in becoming professionally registered and progressing your career. I was really taken with Phil's comment that chartered environmentalists earn a third more than people who aren't chartered. I was also really pleased to see that the average age of registrants is coming down, and I think that's great. And the new registration of Registered Environmental Practitioner, I think, potentially opens this up to a lot more people as they make their professional journey in the way that Gemma described. So that's it from me, apart from one final thank you to Megan Williams, the Institute Water Marketing and Events Manager, who is behind the scenes on all of this, but she has made these 4 sessions of the conference go perfectly, seamlessly, and without a hitch. And given that we're talking about technology and folk all over the UK, that's a terrific achievement. So I think we could all give Megan a virtual round of applause for doing such a fantastic job. Well done, thank you. And thank you, all of you. And I hope you've enjoyed the conference. Found it enjoyable and inspiring and informative, and look forward to seeing you at the next one in 18 months' time. But before then, there's the engineering conference in April or so next year, and in December there's the Southwest Area weather series of webinars. So cheerio and thanks all.